So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this, which is our very first Flourishing Friday here in Stockport. My name's Shelley. I'm from Flourish. I'm the Programme Development and Support Manager. I'm joined today by 5 fantastic changemakers for our panel on income generation. So we'll be spending the next hour and a half or so finding out exactly how they started to generate income to their organisations, how they managed to keep going, the different mixes that they've used, and so forth. So without further ado, I'm going to start by introducing, for those who are joining us on the recording or on Zoom, this will be a slightly lo-fi version of a recording because we'll be passing my laptop from panelist to panelist, but bear with us because the content's going to be sensational. So first of all, if I could just introduce Amanda and Mel from Heatons Post and Drawing Board Productions. If you want to say a couple of words about yourself and your organisation, that'd be great.
Right. Look at you guys and not this, sorry guys. I'm Mel from Drawing Board Productions. I met Amanda many years ago doing community work and was on mat leave when she came up with this crazy idea of starting a community newspaper. We live in the Heatons and we recognised that there wasn't any platform for community groups, social enterprise, charities and local business to really shout about all the good things that they're doing. There's loads and loads of Facebook groups. You can jump on social media and find out from various different places what's going on, but are people really finding out everything in one easy to access place? Heatons Post was born. I'll let you fill in the rest.
I'm Amanda, Mel's colleague, Drawing Board Productions. So we started Heatons Post at a really bad time, March 2020. So had straight into lockdown and had that to deal with. So we weren't sure it was even going to last, but actually in some ways it aided what we were trying to achieve in reaching people. So the paper Heatons Post has grown since then. We've now been going 2.5 years. And we have a distribution of 13,000 across the Heath and Reddish. Since then, we've launched 3 more papers, Cheadle Post for Cheadle, Hume and Gatley, Disby Post for Disby and Burnage, and Chorlton Post for Chorlton and Whalley Range. And we're just about to launch a completely separate publication, which is called Arts and Culture Stockport, which aims to support the arts and culture sector across the whole of Stockport. And alongside that, we do various other events for the community, and we run a community hub, and various other projects.
Great little shop there as well.
Lots of nice unique gifts.
I believe so. Well, we've taken some already. If anybody would rather we didn't take photos, give us a wave. About wanted to check. Give us a wave and we'll make sure we angle the camera separately.
Hi, I'm Claire Worthington. I feel like everyone in the room has just had my intro, but this is my business, the Village Web Company. So I build websites and help people learn how to do things with computers.
Thank you. My name's Nickala, as some people will know. Set up Flourish Together. Obviously, there's all sorts of interesting ways we make income to both run what we do, but then reinvest profits in women as a force for social change. We also run something called Pop-Up Spa and Retreat as a sister company to ours, which I might touch on as well, because that's another way that we're helping people get into work and earn a living, make a difference, and another social venture we run. And last but not least, I didn't mention it before, I'm just going to just show you this little creature. So our how-to festival, who knows whether it'll be a big income generator for us, but sometimes you need those lost leaders and you need to showcase talent that's out there. And we certainly hope that this will be a little shop window for others. And the how-to festival is an online digital festival running till the end of the year. We might sneak it into Christmas, so you can have buy your Christmas gifts and buy people the gift of going to the how-to festival, but we'll see about that. It's something for people to go on to get involved with, and we'll mention more about that later.
Okay. Hello everybody, I'm Oonagh McDonell from ItsHerStory, and I set up ItsHerStory just over 4 years ago to start producing stories about women, most particularly getting more inclusivity and representation for women in the Greater Manchester area. I set up ItsHerStory because I have just really returned from overseas, having spent, the sort of close of that particular stage of my career working in the Middle East. I am a three-dimensional designer. I moved into visual communications and into film production. And I came back to England because it was the right time to be back with family, to find that I couldn't get work. And whoa, I was suddenly aware of an awful lot of other women who were in the same position. And rather than go to battle, I thought I'll just set up something myself, which will address some of the issues that I'd faced. And that was the birth of ItsHerStory. We have, in very recent months, been successful in getting the proper good investment. I believe we were the first, I was told. I'm really looking forward today to having an opportunity to talk to you about what, how that came about and what was involved and what we hope to get out of it. So that's my story.
Thanks, Oonagh. I'll keep computing with you actually instead of saying passing all my back on the line. If you could just tell us a bit about where your income generation started. So how did you get started and where have you got to now in terms of the mix of income coming into your organisation?
Well, the whole process really started through a process of communication with Greater Manchester charity and voluntary sector. And we were looking at various funds that we could tap into because I was aware that it was becoming more and more challenging to balance getting funding in, to, you know, sort of commitment to developing and building to the next stage for the company. So we were looking at what we could do to generate income by other means. And we have, not only within our board, but with the people, the partnerships that we'd formed and the collaborations that we've made, a pool of talent. And so we thought we can use that. And also what we found was that many of the women that we had been working with over the years of delivering the Achiever program, which is essentially a 12-week transitions program, was that a lot of the women were setting up their own business, but they still needed to have support, whether it be, you know, information about where they can go with their products, and, you know, sort of tapping into other useful advice, just the practical information. And we had, as an organisation, this amazing network, not just through Nickala, but also through Simone and through an awful lot of other organisations. And we thought we can use this talent and information and build on that, produce products, and not only produce products, but while we're at it, why not create a platform that other, you know, small businesses run by women can showcase their products as well. So that is the intention behind our It's Her Trade. And so in preparing and building and planning for that, I worked very closely with the team at Greater Manchester Charity and Voluntary Sector, the investment team, who were amazing. I can't praise them enough because they really made me think hard about the reality of planning for, you know, 2 to 5 years of investment. And at the end of the day, whilst it's great that it is there, that investment fund, it has to be paid back. And so that was a big burden for me initially, because I was trying to get my head around, we're non-profit, you know, should we be taking on this? But at the end of the day, we are also a business and in an increasingly competitive world. So that was the reason we looked at the first collaboration of bringing in people to work with that knew the area of, that we're very familiar with producing, designing products, ordering merchandise, putting that merchandise on a website, controlling what comes in and, you know, the demand, all of that side of it. So I needed to work with people like that, because if I was starting from scratch, I would be lucky to get anything off the ground for another 2 years, because it was so intense. It was such a lot to do. But we have, in the time that the award was sort of, that I'd been given the verbal nod, and the time that, you know, all the paperwork and everything was being prepared, I had put aside a reserve to cover all the costs of getting the platform up and ready, get the products on order, get everything designed, and to really plan out what kind of things.
Was that reserved from within your own organisation, or when you say you got reserve?
It was from within the organisation, yes. And it was not a lot, but we knew that we could now commit to that with knowing that the investment fund was in place. And so far, according to the business plan, we are hitting the targets, which I'm amazed at, given that we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis. But one of the things that has come about that's absolutely crucial, I would say, for any business who's considering doing this is, number one, know your brand. Number two, really spend, you know, a budget to make sure that your brand is really well promoted and clear. And the other side of it is put together a group of people that really know this area properly. Don't try and wing it. Don't try and wing it, because you'll end up just with a nervous breakdown and an awful lot of money, which no one wants to do. So I'm thankful so far that we have managed to do that. But the other thing that is really important is put yourself out there. And in spite of the fact of what you see today, that is really right outside my comfort zone. I cannot tell you enough to push yourself and put yourself in a position of, you know, going to places that you wouldn't normally go to, put up stalls or speak at events. That is what it's going to take, I'm afraid.
Shall I say a bit about how we've done it?
Absolutely. I was going to say that'd be really interesting, because obviously you've worked in social enterprise.
And I'm going to go at it from the wing it point of view. No, I mean, to be fair, if you're to be fair, you know, at the start you have to wing it, and we work with a lot of startups. But you know, Oonagh's absolutely right. By the time if you're developing a retail business and you're developing this sort of business, and if you're going for social investment, then you absolutely can't wing it. And I think also just on that social investment side, because I've worked in the funding world for a long time, even if you go for these sorts of things, be they grant funding, be they, you know, social investment, often, like it or not, even if you don't get the money, the process of going through that exercise is a really helpful one if you've got the time and the patience and the headspace and you're prepared to learn the skills and put in the work. And anyway, that was just an observation on that. So Flourish, gosh, well, we started with no money at all and just faffing about, really. I think Joe and I we knew, we could see that there was some, in fact, take a quick step back. So I was working for Unlimited at the time. They're a national funder. I've worked off and on for 12 years or more for them. And at the time, as well as helping set up that organisation, running their programmes, grants of various sizes, and help people, you know, about 2,000 people I'd supported by the time I'd left Unlimited. Big programme that I went back to support was to do with the universities and boxing up Unlimited's model to get the university sector to think differently about what they do. And when that programme was coming to an end, it was like, oh, now what? And it was through asking other people, what should we be doing? We ran an away day that, because we didn't quite know where we were all going to go on to. And I designed this away day to get us to think, you know, what should we be doing now? If we weren't here, where would we rather be? And what should we be doing as a job? And it was only through other people's observations that I should be running this organisation. And it's quite nice to put things in the hands of other people and just, you know, hope it all works out. So the winging really does come right from the core. I'm just letting somebody in there. So welcome Louise, if you've joined us. I shall leave you there. So I know that doesn't tell you how we make our income, but it shows you, I'd got a lot of experience that I'd learned from lots of other organisations and that I've been sharing my knowledge with. I really wanted to make sure that I could walk the talk, and that's why I've been setting up these ventures. So when it came to Flourish, I'd done a lot, so I wasn't really winging it. But in terms of what we did, I suppose the point being is, from little acorns, I guess, and we definitely were, we weren't living on acorns, but our projects and our organisations were. And so, little bits of small grants were, we started with just tea and coffee and getting 3 rooms. So that's an entry into anything, really. You don't have to apply for money or fundraise or do anything to get started, depending on what you're thinking. And then from there, long story short, we ended up getting traded work quite quickly. I didn't want to rely on grants because they were a pain in the backside to get and write. And I always say it's a bit of a waste of your time and energy writing grants. If you can go and find repeat custom, it's a bar. If you spend 3 days of your life writing a bid and 3 days of your life generating business, you'll get more out of the business. So that's what we've always, I think the University of Oxford and the University of Manchester were our first customers to help us do, we wrote a piece of research. So yeah, although you might want to do the goal A and goal B, how you get there and how you get the money to do it can often be from somewhere completely different. So our first customers were some universities, and they paid us to do research. And you might notice year on year, every year, we do a few research and policy pieces where we get paid as handsomely as we can, to cover various things and put that money back into what we do. And then, we've always ended up applying for grants, small grants to start with, to build your track record, test the water with these things, pilot. We've certainly spent a lot of time testing things in the first 3 years as the Women Supporting Social Entrepreneurs Network with bits of scatter cash grants and whatnot. It enabled us to pilot lots of things to then shape up what our products and services were going to be, to then crack on and get selling them with people. So social enterprises, housing associations, councils, different types of universities and other organisations buy us in to deliver enterprise support, to deliver consultancy, to do social value reports. So that's one area where we make our money. And then it was only really coming into COVID, when you look at what's your ratio of money, we noticed actually, we were trading more than we were applying for stuff. And it was only since COVID, while the money was there and we had a bit of capacity to apply for things, that we did get a number of grants. And we've had different grants and grant agreements. So grants we've had to pilot and test new things. And I always say, grant money is great for research and development, but then it's got to turn into paid stuff. And the paid stuff then turned, the WEA, we've had a number of grant agreements that are kind of a grant for tax purposes, and that's very helpful, but they feel like a contract in terms of delivering them. Same goes for the council. Manchester City Council have been a good backer of ours and are backing some of our work now. And that's taken ages to build up, to a slightly better offer. But they're a fab partner and they trust us now and they see we deliver. So that's made a difference in the amounts of money they're prepared to invest in us. NatWest have been a really good backer of ours for the last couple of years. So we've had a cocktail, and that's why we talk about cocktails this afternoon. But yeah, bits of R&D money through grants, bits of grants and contracts. And then the other thing I'll just mention to throw it out there, I'll pass it on, crowdfunding. So when we were faffing about, we used crowdfunding because it was like, we want to create a seed fund to invest in women. Where are we going to get it? And that was a great sneaky way of getting money. We did it 4 years in a row, and then we were done. We were exhausted, and we'd shown people that what we did worked, and they wanted to back it. So now the crowdfund, seed fund money, we build into contracts and we build into other grants. So we've not had to crowdfund for the last 4 years, but we might end up crowdfunding again in the near future for something else. So a mixture, I guess, is where our incomes come from. And in terms of pop-up spa, again, we've had bits of grants to test things and get some screens and get the beds and get started. Then we've had some contracts from a housing association, and then through the WEA and through a couple of other sources to train people up in complementary therapies. I think to date we've now trained about 50 people in the last sort of 3 or 4 years in holistic therapies to level 2 and level 3, and people they'll pay a small amount for their therapies, and we'll get subsidised opportunities through contracts and grants for the rest, is generally how that works. So that's a mixture of different things.
Get started generating income, and where has it led you to now?
Okay, well, I started from behind, which I wouldn't recommend unless you really like waking up at 4 in the morning and freaking yourself out. Most of what I do, because what I do, you can kind of split it into like 3 bits. So I build websites for small businesses, I deliver training courses that people pay to come on, and I also run digital skills workshops to help fight digital exclusion. Because although I spend all day, every day on the internet with my face either in my phone, in my iPad, in my laptop, and the internet's great and I love it for work, for play, for everything. It's great, love it. If I'm awake, I'm probably on the internet. But there are a lot of people for whom that isn't. So when I get oh, you just go online. Well, actually, it's not just if you don't have a laptop, if you don't have a smartphone, if you've got a smartphone, but you've got no data, if you've got an iPad, but you don't know how to do anything other than switch it on. It's not just. Just is like the worst of all the 4-letter words. And I got into this, I mean, I do rant quite a bit from time to time. Usually there's a method in the madness. But this idea of things like, if you think about councils, so where I'm based in Romley, we have a lot of older people who live in the village, people who are maybe in their 80s. Well, when I was at school, computers had been invented, but we didn't use them in primary school. At high school, we got a new building, so we had a computer suite. So we had about 20 computers in the whole school. For my grandkids, there's a computer in every classroom. Their parents have got smartphones. If I leave my phone near my nearly 3-year-old granddaughter, she will have it. And she's been like that for about 2 years. It's part of their day-to-day life. If you imagine being in your 80s, and actually, if you want to order a new wheelie bin, you've got to go on the council's website, because you can't ring up and say, some scroats just nicked me blue bin, can I have a new one? You have to do that online. Universal credit, there is no paper form for universal credit. You have to make an online application. That, for me, as much as I love the internet, that's absolutely not okay. So I've kept going on Twitter and ranting about wheelie bins because it's kind of me.
And how do you find the money to be able to, I guess, operate here or operate your courses to help people? For me,
the idea of becoming a CIC, so I was building websites before anyway, and I went to uni and I learned how to code and all of that. But the idea was that the surplus from building websites was going to pay to run the digital skills stuff. The problem for me really is about the balance, because I wanted this particular unit because it's a big accessible box. It's within walking distance for a lot of the people that I want to try and support, but it's still a big bag of money every year. British Gas feel no way at all about sending me threatening letters and charging me extra if I don't pay on time. And they've proved that more than once. It's a bit of a sore point. But the idea of that, actually, originally I was really keen that I didn't want to rely on grants, because if you don't get them, if the money's not there for digital exclusion this year, if next year, if the buzzword is something else, well, you're a bit landed. But the problem with that is that the balance doesn't work out, because at the moment, if I'm the only person building the websites, if I want to do a good job and not just churn out endless, everybody's website looks exactly the same and it takes me 5 minutes to make, there wouldn't be enough surplus to be able to do that. So I've had to have a bit of a rethink, and also coming up with the idea of programs. So I wanted to do a digital playgroup. And the idea of the digital playgroup is that if you want to learn how to use your computer, if you're a parent of a young child, you would normally need somebody else to watch your kid while you go on the course. The idea of the digital playgroup is you come here and you bring your kid with you. So there'll be an on-site creche and your kid will be doing stuff with a trained nursery nurse. But also Claire's going to show you some useful websites. So instead of just giving your kid your phone on YouTube with whatever might suddenly pop up, actually, have you seen this website? Have you seen that? Things like the Healthy Start vouchers. There's not enough people applying for them because they've made it an online process. So it's my eldest is 32 now. Back in the day, when you went into the post office and you claimed your child benefit on paper, they gave you a physical voucher. Now you have to do an online application. They send you a card. You have to go online and act. All of that has become a new thing.
Am I right in thinking, I think I saw on Twitter, you've got a grant to deliver
a project
here on
I've got some funding that covered half of it, but it didn't cover having tablets, for example. So Stockport in Woodley, they've managed to get me some tablets to do the other side, because if people bring their own devices, by the time I've got 8 different devices on the Wi-Fi, all of these devices doing different things, it will be a nightmare. So
a mixture really there of some in-kind partnership working and some grant. Where's the grant from, out of interest?
So the grant came from Stockport Homes for the pilot for the digital play group. And then Stockport have helped with the other bit, but also because I do digital exclusion work, I've just found out that I've got a grant from the Good Things Foundation. So to be like a digital capability grant, because the more time I spend building websites so that I can pay the bills, the less time I can spend delivering digital exclusion work. So now I would say that it's a mixture. It would have been better if I'd started with a bag of money in the background, because when I first became self-employed, I used to work for Royal Mail. The job changed every year. Every year you apply for your job. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. If you tick the box, you get to leave with a bag of money. And that's lovely, because you can just make it rain everywhere while you're running about buying stock and attending things and having a whale of a time with my big bag of redundancy. Totally different.
Social ventures with that package.
Totally different this time.
Hearing, Claire, how you started almost with trading income, and now you're using grants to bolster that. Which is
mostly so that I can separate the two parts, because part of as a kick, they've got kind of 2 main aims. So one of them being around fighting digital exclusion, but also about increasing diversity. So when it comes to building websites, I can teach somebody else. So when I started and I sort of went to uni to learn how to do stuff, I would go to meetups and I would be maybe the only woman, I might be the only person of colour, usually the only one that was both. And that for me, I'm a bit of a mouthy cow, it doesn't really bother me that much. I will go pretty much anywhere. But for some people, actually, that might be the reason they don't. And also, you might go to something in good faith and then you might find, actually, this environment really isn't for me. So this idea of these tech bros that everyone knows exists and the darker side of tech, it's not that there's too many white men building websites, there's just not enough of everybody else. So if I can be an environment where actually, if you're in your late 30s and you've decided you want to become a web developer, like me who went to uni at 37, if that's you, well, actually, maybe you don't want to go to a thing where it's full of 20-year-old white guys. Maybe hanging out with Auntie Claire in her shop in Romley is a better place for you to learn. And from my point of view, I can teach the things to anyone as long as you want to learn.
Certainly training contracts are going to hopefully be
definitely.
Are we?
Thanks.
Sorry, I should.
Oh no, fine. No, it's good to hear the different.
But
Same question.
Same question. Where did you start? How did you start bringing in the cash to put the profit behind your purpose?
So very much wingers, unfortunately.
We love wingers.
Still wingers as we go along. So Mel and I had absolutely no background in newspapers. So we're learning on the job and still learning. Our first step in terms of funding, we started a crowdfunder online. That was over Christmas before we launched, which we got a bit of money. And then what we've done for each publication we've launched is because they're very localized, we've been able to apply to the council to their ward area funding. So every area of Stockport, they have their wards for the councillors, and they all have pots of money that if you're a not-for-profit, CIC, charity, you can apply for if it's something that's going to benefit that area. And so we've been successful for each publication in getting that, which has covered the costs of at least the first issue and setup costs, website for each publication, that sort of thing. And then we've applied for funds from various other organisations. Stockport Homes was one. Sector 3 we've had funding from. Quite a few. The issue we have is because a lot of the funding bodies like to have a start and an end to projects where we're ongoing. We want the papers to build, to continue and benefit more and more people. so there is no end. So once we've got that initial kind of bit of a startup funding, nobody's interested after that. So that's been the big issue, which is where we've had to then look at other options.
Yeah, so we recognised we needed to commercialise the project in some way, but we didn't want to be advert heavy. The whole purpose of the newspaper is that it's community content. So the articles are written by the community and submitted from community groups, schools, independent residents that want to have, you know, a positive message about something they've achieved, or you know, good kind of achievement stories from local businesses that are supporting things locally. But we needed to have advertising in there, and that became a revenue stream for us. So I guess we are wingers in the industry, but what we know and know very, very well are our community, and it's the connections that we have and the network that we had from the very outset. A whole bunch of very, very supportive people that came on board. And, you know, you go to a business that doesn't know you and say, we've thought of doing a community newspaper, it doesn't exist. And they're like, well, there's a reason it doesn't exist. Like, no, it doesn't exist because nobody's done it yet. It is a good idea, and we just need your support. So once we had created the first one, then we found actually you can go to an advertiser and say, aha, we did it. This is what you're going to be supporting. And that was then an easier conversation. But to start out that first issue, I think we had 10 local businesses who were mates, and we just said, you know, chuck us £100, we'll get you in this amazing paper. And it's worked for them, hasn't it? It was a good platform for them to reach a new element of the community.
And I think the struggle we've had as well is people understanding exactly what we're providing. So you say to people, oh, we do a community newspaper, and they just think, oh, what, Stockport Express, you know, Manchester Evening News. Entirely different. Like Mel says, the content comes from the community. We don't really write anything. We edit and lay everything out, produce the paper. The content's coming from what's happening in the community. It's very different feel, all positive, all lots of information of what people can access locally, you know, events can go to, groups can get involved in.
The branding of it feels rustic.
And it
might come to my mum's letterbox. And
lovely.
I'm sure you've got there's a fancy little mug that looks like that your 75th edition or something, or you know, so you know, fun little acorns, like we were saying.
Exactly.
I mean, the timing of it helped us as well. It was the weirdest thing to say, but COVID was the making of what we were trying to create, because all the community groups had to stop what they were doing face to face. How are you going to get the news out there to people that are digitally excluded, that can't jump on Facebook and have a look and see what's going on? How are they going to still raise the funds to keep going? And we provided that platform. And because people weren't able to go out and pick it up from the shops, we built a subscription network. So we had people paying a nominal fee. It covered postage and a little bit more. It meant we were going through people's letterboxes. Now for the March, we managed to get February and March out, then it was lockdown. So April and May we did for free. And we were relying on kind of volunteers to get out. So their daily walk, they were taking a bunch of papers, going around their neighbours and getting it into homes. But we did have that subscription model. So I think we put out 100 to subscribers who asked us to send it to them. And then from the June, we said, okay, this is great, postage costs, so you now have to contribute. And they stayed with us. And we're now only dropped about 20 subscribers. We picked up more and dropped some on the way, but those subscribers are still there. It's a very small revenue stream, but it helps. So that was great. Forever Manchester was another funder at the start. And then because of the timing of hitting through COVID, when the government and then the local council released the COVID support grants, we were able to go for that. So those were focused on helping an area regenerate. So we committed then to the other side of what we do, which is community projects. So we have Summerfest, which has always been a historical event for the Heatons. It had a bit of a hiatus before COVID anyway, then COVID obviously stopped everything. Then we did it, we brought it back, we got grant funding to do that. And because we have sponsors that sponsor that event, the money then came to the newspaper by kind of a very roundabout route. And we do Christmas Fest as well, and the hub. So from COVID kind of releasing money within the council, that's helped us to help the community.
And just quickly, what we also recognised was, like, with the first publication, there was only so much advertising revenue we could get in. And so initially our aim was, well, our aim still is, that we want Heatons Post or all our publications to go through every door in each area they cover. So initially we're thinking, okay, we need to build Heatons Post to make sure we do 23,000 copies to get through every door. But the advertising revenue only goes to a certain point. And so we realised that actually to be able to increase the income, we needed to replicate those papers in other areas, give ourselves other income streams. And that was really what kind of like is kind of grown their income. And then we've got, you know, people who advertise in the Heatons Post. Actually, you can actually advertise in Cheadle and Disbury and hit other communities. So it opened up more options, I guess.
Yeah, it's very, very hard if you just stick to your localised network, because they're constantly being asked for money. They constantly got charity support all locally on their doorstep. If you can just kind of broaden your horizon and look out to the wider council, borough, area, nationwide, why not? You know, that's when you got other business support where, you know, they want what you're offering, and, you know, why not ask someone down in London if they wanted to hit the community where you're based? That's not a barrier these days, you know.
Thank you. So some really, really interesting themes there, and something that's just struck me is how, well, the importance of collaboration, community and network and building that, but also just how people are using grants in different ways. So in Oonagh's example, using it to spot opportunities with a view to develop a trading plan. And I think this is something that's really useful to consider at, like, whatever stage you're at your journey. If you are starting up, your grant shouldn't just be considered a project. So what is it that's within your grant that has the potential to develop income streams for the future? And then further along in your journey, so where Claire's at now, so she's talking about capacity building, something so many organisations get to. So there's grants out there again that you can look at a project, but what is it within that grant that can develop your organisation's capacity? You know, how can you test out business development? How can you bring in these strands which will develop your capacity and your, you know, capability to generate income streams in the future? So I'm just going to move on to my next question. I know we're not going through all our questions, but the next one, and I'll start with the Heatons Post ladies here. So when cash flow is difficult, what creative ways have you come up with to deal with managing that situation?
Sure. So we did some maths and we worked out if we wanted to achieve, so we worked out within each area that we operate, there are 23,000 homes. And it just so happens that's actually the same for every area. And if every single household put 20 pence a month into the paper, we would fund ourselves for the year. Now, I think it is about not asking for the massive amount of money all the time, because somebody looks at a grant application perhaps for £1,000 and goes, oh, okay, that's quite a lot of money that organisation's asking for. And if you go to a crowdfunder and you want them to put as much in, £10 is a lot for people. 20 pence is much more manageable. Opening their purse, clearing out their small change is manageable. Scale that up to a whole community doing that, and suddenly you've got a huge amount of cash coming in that hasn't actually impacted each person that greatly. So that's probably been the most creative in terms of raising cash.
And so how did you go about doing that? Just through
through the paper? Yeah, we've kind of got the message out through the paper, obviously through different social media channels, and then we give people the option to pay like a year's worth of monthly 20p's online to £2.40, or to come in and just drop the 20p's in a makeshift tube.
Yeah, we have a little piggy or a makeshift tube. Yeah, and it's so funny because people will pop in and have a chat, and then as they're leaving they go, oh yeah, I've got my 20p's, and they'll pull out a bag of 10 or whatever, and it's so lovely. And then they just put them in each time, or the kids will come in from the local nursery and they'll put their little 20p's in. You know, it's just been surprisingly popular concept for people that feel like they're doing something.
There's one lady who runs a creative writing group, and she kind of holds the purse for the teas and coffees. So she buys the teas and coffees, everyone gives her 20 pence. And she came in and said, I don't need these 20 pences, and gave them, so we get them now. So that's quite nice. And then we always seem to have, people just seem to come to us with ideas, and they're like, there you go, you should do that.
They know we don't say no, this is the problem.
So we kind of have the big difficulty of saying no to things. So if we don't kind of have, we're quite good at pinging off each other and coming up with ideas, but if we don't ourselves, then other people seem to come to us and be like, oh, well, what about this, you should do this. And we just need to learn to be like, it's just two of us.
And then we've merchandised, haven't we? So we run a festival which is free to the community, but we've created mugs and tote bags. We did a recipe book last year, the year before, which was, we basically made sure that we had enough revenue coming from the newspaper to pay to produce it, and now any income from sales that goes back into the projects that we do.
And do you find those merch opportunities are profitable?
Now that we have the hub, it's been easier to sell. We didn't really get much traction when we were selling online during the festival period. Then the merchandise sales are great because everyone's just in the moment of, I need a memorabilia. But now that we've got the shop, that has become easier. and yeah, taking the shop. So we were obviously in each other's kitchens basically through COVID, not seeing each other, not having meetings, and we managed, it was fine, but needed somewhere we could both be together. So we needed an office space, and we thought, well, actually an office space plus let's build a community space plus let's actually support artisan makers. Amanda's background is from starting a local market, so we've got a lot of friends who are artisan makers, so that's been another revenue stream for us because we have a nominal shelf rental or commission from sales for them. So the hub's been another creative route to explore. It doesn't necessarily pay for itself, but yeah, it's kind of something that we're exploring. It's a revenue stream. Yeah,
it's experimentation.
Tons every day.
Well, remind me of the question, and I'll try and stay on top of it. Probably two things. First bit is like good advice. But from not just randomers who are like, oh, you want to do this? Don't, smile and wave at that point. But also having good friends, because sometimes the numbers don't stack up. And by good friends, I'm also including my husband and particularly his bank card. He must really, really, really love me. But there's times when there's things where actually I just can't do that thing. You have a little bit of the robbing Peter to pay Paul. But there's things that are non-negotiable. So like I had Declan with me for 6 months. He was on a Kickstarter. On the last day of the month, you can't not pay him. But DWP kind of for the first however many weeks of him being there, it's like his first payday came up before the DWP had sort of paid the money that was going to cover his wages. And that's where Mr. Worthy Bob's bank card came up, because Declan needed to get paid. It's not open to discussion. You can't have somebody working for you and not pay them. So sometimes there's a bit of shenanigans.
Have bank accounts with an overdraft that's appropriate for the businesses that we're running.
But also, Claire, we were just talking about how initially you weren't necessarily thinking about using the space to rent out, but now that's something you're...
No, well, I think the problem with... when I first got the space and I got the keys, everyone who sort of wandered past was like, oh, it's amazing, you should be, and everyone had a long list of things I wanted to do. There was people locally, they wanted to hire it out to run a Christmas doing. I don't really need people in here drinking, and that's no, absolutely not. So I had to kind of sort of pause, because firstly, the sign didn't get updated for a long time. It still said it was a mobility shop. So the fact that this space was going to get used for everything that had nothing to do with digital, it's like long term, it would have been a bad idea. But also just all of these random things where everyone's like, oh, great, there's a space where I can now run this. No, this is not your space, this is my space. But the idea of actually renting this space out to hold meetings, to run workshops, well, that makes sense. And also it doesn't involve me. So it's like today, the room is set up very differently to how it normally looks, but being able to actually, I'll just set out the refreshments and you can have the room and I'll be in that little office in the corner if you need me. Well, that works perfectly well. So if you are running workshops, but you might only run one 3 or 4 times a year, it's not worth you having your own space to do that in when you can just rent this one. And it is an accessible space. It is ground floor. There's no stairs involved. There's a lot of people who would find it useful to do that. So being able to rent the space was one thing, but also looking at other ways.
Everyone in this room now knows that you build websites, you offer training, and in terms of generating customers. Because
the thing with the space is even when you walk into the shop, it's not really that obvious that I build websites. It should be, but it isn't. So it's another opportunity to get that out there. I mean, over Christmas it was madness because I was selling Christmas hoodies, and we've got the Love Romley shopping bags. But if you walked in the shop, it still said Romley Mobility over the door. You could buy a Romley shopping bag and you could buy a Christmas hoodie. There was nothing. That's a cash flow thing,
isn't it? Keep
absolutely.
Chipping away until you manage to do it.
Yeah. So it is getting there, but sometimes it's about being a bit flexible, but also just holding your nerve a little bit and sort of occasionally just thinking, right, I need to do this differently, because there's some ideas that I've got that I can't do now that I'm going to have to put off until I've got the money to do it. So
and you don't just have to deliver all your own ideas. It's a bit like what you were saying before. These people come to you. You know, the beauty of us coming in, which I've not even mentioned in this room yet, coming to Heaton Chapel to take over the derelict building there, which will be an income generation option for us. It isn't yet, but in time, we hope that will generate surplus to then cover a local member of the team and reinvest money back in the community, we can hopefully, work in partnership to deliver, little enterprise support programs so that these ideas don't get plunked onto you. We empower and support them to take them on themselves. Thank you very much. So lots of options there. Oh, this question is kind of filled me with dread. Although our bank account is fine and has been, we've been in profit 5 years in a row, small profits that we make and declare so that we're not paying huge amounts of corporation tax on it because everything else is getting reinvested. But yeah, I haven't got a Mr. Worthy Bobs to call on. So, and I certainly won't go to my parents for that kind of thing. So it's like, that I think what I do to make sure our cash flow works is know exactly what's coming and plan. What's that daft phrase? Fail to plan to fail. And I'm spreadsheet galore on in terms of what's happening. And I initially you can keep a lot of it in your head, and I think Claire's probably still in that space a little bit, a lot of it in your head, but then there comes a point where if you get it down and you can just keep going back, right, what are the leads, what's coming through.
Sometimes you need to actually see it on paper, because what you think is happening, but then when you actually look at it and you think, oh, actually no, and being able to break it down at a level that makes sense to you. So you know how much you've spent, you know how much has come in, but actually looking at stuff, the amount of free hosting that I was giving away, so people where they bought maybe a website that included 12 months free hosting.
Value, haven't we?
Yeah.
Drawing a line under some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But just not having the systems in place to be able to say, actually, your 12 months free hosting is up in November. In October, I need to tell you that you're going to move on to a maintenance contract, not you're going to get a year and a half free hosting because Claire didn't realise when it ran out, and then it felt a bit awkward, and then it just dragged on. So trying to get out of those bad habits.
I think most people fall into one of two categories. They either do this stuff automatically, they track what's coming in, what's going out.
You've got to be able to sleep at night in my world.
Visibility, but if you're not one of those people who likes doing that stuff, find somebody who can help you set up those systems, because it's the only way.
And they can be quite simple. It can be a book, it can be a bit of paper, it can be just, it can be Excel, but checking on a monthly basis. And this is the other thing, if you've got to look what's out there, and we spend other sessions talking about who are your stakeholders, who's your audience, who are your customers. But if you've got this way of logging who's a potential customer, who's turned into one, or what's a potential grant, what you're applying for, what's turned into one that you received, you're paying attention to it, and that all helps it.
Absolutely. And there's a marketing adage, which is something, it takes something like 25 times as much money to bring in a new customer as to retain someone. So if you're looking at your retained business and working out why it's retained, what's repeated, whether you can generate new products and services for them, that's going to be much easier than just trying to find new customers constantly.
And businesses that have networks, I know there's like Facebook and there's others, I think, but they're like very nebulous, and real networks, you keep hold of people that way, communities and social enterprises are very good at that, and it's probably something we forget do on purpose. I'll pass on to Oonagh for your any cash flow thoughts.
Well, and I just wanted to pick up again on the winging it, because I actually think, and it goes to what's at the base of our particular mission, and it's empowering women to pursue their passion and purpose. And actually winging it, if you think about it, it's quite a negative connotation to it, but in reality, it's about taking your passion and coming up with a calculated risk. And this is what we do in our Achiever program. We enable women to realize what it is that they want to do. And it may be a business, it may not, it might be pursuing something else, a career move, whatever. But the fact is, it's a calculated risk. And what holds so many women-run businesses back is the fact that traditionally we're very risk averse. And, the more and more programs that are developed, like the Achiever, it's like the Wave of Change, and the programs that you do, that's changing things a lot now, because not only do women find the courage and the confidence to do what they want to do, but they can actually realise that the passion that they have can be changed with very careful coaching and support, changed into reality. And in terms of from that, I would say is where the basis that I came from. You know, I knew that I had a skill set. I knew that I had identified a need where there wasn't enough women in in media generally that were being represented. That was my particular passion. And so I started about creating projects to do that. And then to enable it, I was bringing in the fact that I had a background in training and teaching, and so could incorporate that within the courses. Now I'm having to take another leap of faith, but to a certain extent, having done it a few times before and been reasonably successful, it gives you the courage to push a few more boundaries. And that's what we're doing now with our products for going online. And we sat down and calculated that we were going to have to move into areas and promote ourselves. And again, using, you know, the buzzword that we're really passionate about is inclusivity and diversity, with representatives of the board and the companies that I work with. We had a stall at Pride, and we came up with a series of products, not overtly Pride focused, because we knew that it would be saturated with products for that. But one of the areas, great learning curve, can I just give you that? Yeah. Was that we produced a t-shirt that absolutely flew out. Seriously, it flew out because it touched with not only women of a certain age, women of a certain age's daughters, but also gay men. Absolutely. I would have endless conversations at the stall about dinner. How much ladies. Are those t-shirts? And then you got your card machine. Yeah, I haven't actually. But no, these retail for £26 on the website. We were selling them for 22 at the stall. And they're really, really good quality t-shirts. And again, we just very luckily, and this was done by our designer, who is very active within the gay community. She knew what she was doing. Yeah. She knew what she was doing. And, you know, we had it transferred onto tote bags and onto other things as well, onto cards and things. That's just one example of a calculated risk, not winging it. Yeah. So that's just basically, I just wanted to
just something that we've not explored or talked about, and we'll just touch on, because I'm sure there were people in the room at different stages of thinking about these things, is none of us have talked much about, you know, when the cash is tight, whether it's cash flow or starting out, you know, thinking about how much you can do with fresh air or in-kind support, or, you know, how can you cut your costs, and, you know, things like rent, and look, you know, we've not started paying for room hire till about, I don't know, year 4 or 5. You know, and we should really be going back to make connections to get more free space, which we were very good at. And then, you know, now we're paying for everything. But I think free space, it's there if you know where to find it. I know it's gotten harder actually, and that's probably why I've gone, oh. And actually people need, you know, consistency, which is why we've evolved in the way we have. The, you know, if you've not got the overheads of an office or, you know, a set room, that is a massive difference to your startup or ongoing costs. Certain social enterprises and different groups and things, you know, refreshments, everything else. I mean, people fair share. So supermarkets in certain places are throwing food out the door like nobody's business. So making relationships where you've got the time to get that food going to landfill, you know, whether it's, you know, supermarkets and other people who will back that sort of stuff. You know, we know other people who are running digital media companies who making relationships with fancy camera companies and getting, you know, the social story and the CSR journey, you know, means that corporates and others will gift stuff across. It all takes more time, but where it works, it can save, you know, that's a potential.
It's often the network that really makes the difference. When I look at where most of my work comes from, it's people who either know me or somebody that knows me has given my name to them. So when people know who you are and they know what you're about, that's often the first thing. It's not my amazing social media presence that's getting me my work, because it dips. I had a lad on work experience and it suddenly increased by about 1,000,000% in the 4 days that he was here. A lot of the time it is people knowing you and thinking, well, I'll at least ask her. It doesn't necessarily mean that they always pick you, but the fact that people know who you are and what you're about, it makes a big difference.
Which leads us perfectly on to our next question, which is how do you go about generating new business? And should we start at that end, just because the computer's up there?
Okay.
So,
well, I think it is about sort of pushing a few comfort boundaries, certainly in our situation. Maybe that's it. I have the advantage of being a bit older and got to the point where I couldn't give a shit anymore. So, you know, you just kind of push it out there. And yeah, I would say it is about, you know, finding new situations that you wouldn't normally explore, and keep communicating, keep collaborating. And one of the things, if anyone sort of follows us on social media, that I'm really, really passionate about is sharing information. If I see somebody who's doing an event, doesn't matter if it's small or big, and you know it's within this kind of community of people, I will always share it. It's just a small thing that everybody can do, and it can make a difference. Or, you know, make a comment, or share it within the groups. We have a lot of groups. I know Nickala, and anything that I see, I put it into the groups. And that comes back. It's interesting when you're saying about sort of new opportunities, but that does come back. Someone else will come back.
Having that patience. It's a lot of new starts and different people, or people who've not done much sort of enterprise work before, then get very impatient when they're trying to do this stuff. And it's like, oh, nobody wants my thing, or why is nobody responding to my emails, or, you know, and that's not really how business works. Every business and every person really has got their own sort of lead time, really on, and it's worth noticing over the months and the years. It does take years sometimes, you know, for the business actually to come back. And you know, it's like when a plumber starts out, or an electrician, or anything else, you know. Granted, there's, you know, people know what that is, and they, you know, there's word of mouth and all those things, but you know, their clientele, it takes years for that to build up to the point where it's solid. And the same goes for our businesses. And you know, we're not fixing taps, we're doing something quite niche, so it takes that while longer as well. So.
It is, but I would say very passionately that actually we can make changes. You know, we can change that way of thinking and working. Because a lot of us do work in silos. You know, we get consumed with the day-to-day running of the business, and other things that tend to be on the shoulders of women running companies. But you know, if we make a concerted effort to really change the landscape, and that's, you know, in terms of flipping and enabling organisations like the ones that are represented here today to be pushed forward in terms of, you know, sort of real promotion, we can do that. I think
certainly
it was
building
really,
supply chains in the social sector is a big thing that
it was something that you mentioned before about, you know, going to small business sessions, events. They tend to be very dry. And that's because we're not represented there. And we can change that. We can absolutely change that if we want to. So that's my bit of passion to get behind, to start making those changes.
Remind me of the question.
I will do. It's specific because so it's about generating new business, but I'm really interested to hear specifically about, so you talked about your first customers, Flourish University. So what are the practical things you do to get that research piece.
It's interesting because when you first asked the question, I was like, you know, I just do this by osmosis. It's, you know, and you kind of live and breathe it. I guess I will answer the question, but it goes back to some of what Una's saying there is, you know, it's in your DNA if you want to support others to never lose an opportunity. So as much as I'm constant, you know, people will be bored. I mean, I can, whether I'm on the bus, whether I'm on a train, at a funeral, every I can think of examples wherever I've been. You know, call me boring and a workaholic, which I am, but by accident, usually it's not like, oh, I'm there with my business cards. I've never had business cards. I hate business cards. Get rid of your business cards. They're pointless is my top tip, but other people may disagree with that. But I hate it when people give me a business card, by the way, so don't ever give me a business card.
You can do it all digitally.
Exactly. No, but to be fair, I've had a career where I've gone into conferences and things and people throw these business cards at you and I'm like, I have pockets in I have coat pockets of coats that I've not worn for 5 years that have business cards in that people are throwing at me, and I'm like, oh. So I think it comes from that. I will email you there and then, done, and then I know that so that's, you know, new business development is about spotting every opportunity and following up on managing it so you can purposefully follow up on the leads that you generate and just don't go really business. Yeah, it's got its place, but not so much in the social economy, but also say business cards, I'm just not a fan.
Okay, so not business cards.
But what? So how did the research?
So yeah, just like practical, just for people who might not have had a contract from a council before or a grant, what would be the practical steps for getting started in that process?
So councils, oh Simone, you're probably a good one on this. Councils are a very slow burn, and they will not back you for love nor money, and they'll ignore you for a long time. They've already got who they were working with, thank you very much. They've already got things set up. It's a big headache for them to have to take on and procure new things, but the way to get into whoever, public sector in particular, is to build a relationship over time and recognise it's
called badgering them.
Well, there's badgering and not letting them off the hook, there's shaming them into it, and there's looking at you've got to, people will only back things, success breeds success, that's the thing, isn't it? So if you've piloted something, even if it's something small, if you've promoted that, if you've measured the impact of that, even if only 4 people turned up, and it's at the start, I remember I've run peer learning sessions where we've only had 4 people in the room, but they all got loads out of it. It was well worth running. Photos, whatnot, the evidence there, part of your track record to build the rest of it. So don't be, unless it's causing you headaches financially, logistically, capacity, to run something where it's actually a bit of a lost leader, or there's small groups initially or small benefits initially, stick with it, because consistency is what will get larger people, whether it's councils, whoever else backing you.
Sometimes they might have specific, especially like things like if you want to be a supplier to, like, say, the NHS, well, there's very specific things that you need to be able to tick those boxes. Yeah. If you don't know what the boxes are, well, you can't do anything with that. So sometimes finding out, actually, do I need to be this? What do I need to do to get on these suppliers, in case you've got to go through some process beforehand?
I mean, that's the thing, when you talk about research, lots of people who are running social ventures, if they've fallen into it by accident, if they're coming with lived experience, they want to change something that they've seen, if they've just, a lot of this happens by serendipity and accident initially. Strategy and reading strategic reports and going to conferences where strategic leaders are is like, what the hell's that? And so getting on forums, joining other people's boards, and going to put yourself in places where these people are, so they can learn about you and you can learn about them. Learning about people's patterns, manners, behaviours, what they've got budget for, like you say, what's in the local, what is in the strategic plans, that you can say, well, you said this is what your strategic plan says, and here's our solution to deliver it. Or we talk about PESTEL reports on some of these things, and it's not just filling in a table. It's like political environmental, social, technological, local and economical, you know, whichever version. It's about finding the reports that back all this up, so that your evidence that you can put in front of them of what the local, national and strategic landscape looks like is one thing, and your impact. So impact data has been a big turning point for us. I know I'm an evangelist on it, but because we're social value specialists and it's part of how we earn our living, but I've got numerous people that we've done social value reports for, you know, small tiny ones that they can afford or much bigger ones, and it's just transformed things in terms of what they can physically say about what they do in terms of their, not just USP and not just, you know, nice testimonials about what people have said. It really helps them track their value for the future and articulate it and communicate it to different audiences, so that whether it's council, housing, unis, corporates or whoever can, digest what they're doing and go, we need a piece of that. So
there's kind of a couple of points. There's first of all gathering the data, the pictures, the testimonies, whatever, that shows that what you're doing works. So that's the first step. And then the second step, kind of ties in with what you were saying, Oonagh, is getting out in front of people, getting in those places where those people are, and finding ways of sharing information. And the thing that I think you haven't emphasised how much of this you do, Nickala, is you tell people constantly about the good work that Flourish does. And it's probably more...
Sorry, evangelist, osmosis.
But it's vital, otherwise people wouldn't know. So they're not probably going to go to your website because they've never heard of you. But if you're in front of them, you've got an opportunity to say, we've run this workshop, this is what happened, this is what changed these people.
And we're constantly, I mean, it's a different business model for us, but you might not all have this, but we're constantly investing in other people. We're in a hashtag investing women changemakers, and you know, we're investing in other people, and they're our champions, ambassadors. And I'm rarely on their back asking them to say a nice word about us. Sometimes they do, sometimes they forget, sometimes, you know, there's all sorts of fabulous things that people talk about. And I think we've built in a culture and you know, within the way we work and the kinds of networks and the people we attract that we work with, that it just happens. No, that's not, you know, but you forget how it happened.
To be fair, you've been doing it for a long time though.
You just do it automatically.
It just keeps happening. But if you think about all the people you've met over time, because literally I was saying earlier on that most of the people in this room I've met as a result of yourself and Simone, because between them they've introduced me to lots of other people. Or you go to a thing and you see somebody that, oh, weren't you at that other thing? And particularly in social enterprise, we just keep popping up, and we pop up in all the same places. And by the time he pops up in the same places a few times, you're pretty much mates by then. And all of that starts to make a difference. So really just change.
For you, Claire, how do you go about generating success?
Sometimes it's like on purpose, and I've like thought about it and I've done a lot of work, but sometimes some things happen on their own. So some of the stuff, it's like, for example, I will get an email off somebody and they'll say, oh, such and such a body recommended it. I'm having a problem with my website and this person. And I'm like, the person who's recommended me, I didn't even necessarily know really well. It's like when your mates tell their mates, that kind of makes sense. But it's like, actually, that's amazing that this person that I don't know that well has put me forward to somebody that they know as somebody who might be able to help him. So you get a little bit of that.
Reputation builds, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Those warm introductions are so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think as well, going to things, I mean, you could literally fill your diary with attending stuff. There's so many different things you could go to. You could be a full-time event attender, but you generally wouldn't have time to do the work.
You'd be bankrupt.
Yeah, but sometimes there's people that go into enough things. Sometimes it's about going to the right things. And whenever you go to something, I'll go somewhere. I always have a pen and paper somewhere. And sometimes that's where I have ideas. I might be sat doing one thing, but my brain is doing something completely different. I can have an amazing idea for somebody's website while I'm sat in a meeting doing something else. So sometimes things happen on their own, but quite often it's thinking about, right, what's the thing that I want to, in my case, it's what things have I started doing by accident that I need to rein in to make more time for the other stuff that I can see is actually where I want to be going.
Remember early in my career, I used to, before by an appraisal or something like that, but I used to track my diary and it sounds a bit boring, but categorise what I've been doing. Have I been wasting my time here? You know, and then when you start to think, well, was this worth it? Was that not worth it? What was worth it? it either gives you some comfort or it makes you go, actually, you know, I don't need to bother with this lot again, or I'll focus on this. So people, a little bit of analysis around what you're doing. And what you just said then about networks and people will often, they'll come thinking, oh, I don't know to start, oh, how do I make this work? Who'll be my first customers? And, you know, they forget they've lived on this earth for however long they have. And if they just sat and mapped out who they know, you know, from certain circles, you know, the very fag packet stakeholder engagement, just on the level that your brain can do that, you know, who you do sports with, who is in your friends and family, who have you ever worked with, who's down whatever pub, restaurant or something else, or you just, who are your champions, or who do you know who you could pick up the phone and let them know what you're up to, or then you'll have 10 people easily.
I found it a lot easier with the charity that I help run. So I run a charity called Space that supports families who've got children with ADHD. And for that, it's really straightforward because who our audience is dead obvious. Everything that we do, it's really straightforward. Whereas when it's sort of me building websites, doing training, it can all morph into a bit of a weird mix. But I found it's very straightforward with that because I can see exactly what it is. I know exactly what we're trying to achieve. And what I found is trying to take the learnings from how I run Space into the Village Web Company CIC, because I've had to rein in some of the activities we were doing for that because it was like, it could be a full-time job in its own right. So sometimes when things start to get out of their own space. So it's been quite good using that as examples, reining that in a bit, but also using some of the learnings that I've picked up over the years of running Space to applying bits of that to what I do sort of as my business. So I need to give you this.
Thanks. So Amanda and Mel, generating new business.
Yeah, so I mean, we've tried various things. We've been invited, or we are invited constantly to different business networking sessions. And we've been to a few, don't really work for us because we just don't fit. We're always the only CIC not-for-profit in the room. A lot of the time you can tell that other businesses don't quite get what we do or why we do it. So it's tricky. I mean, we have got some contacts from those, to be fair, but whether we've actually got business from them, I'm not so sure.
They've been useful in other ways, haven't they?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess so from our advertising, it's a very simple model of you get a flyer through your front door. Well, they're advertising in print. So why not advertise in the newspaper and not print 10,000 flyers and do the legwork of getting those out? So that's a simple conversation. And looking at other ways that people do print advertising. So obviously Stockport Express and the MEN and local publications. I mean, we're the only one of our kind in terms of competitors, but there are other print media where we can go to those people and say, you know, this is our model and this is what we do. But I think it's just in those initial conversations being super, super clear of the benefits of them working with you. So in that initial email that I send out, once I know who I should be speaking to in the company, I'm saying to them in bullet point, did you know we're a community interest company? We reinvest all our profit from advertising. We have this distribution model, this volume, and this is what you'll get out of it. And for their kind of corporate social responsibility, it's a win-win for them. Businesses are going to be having to show how they're supporting community ventures and social enterprise and how they're working outside of just that corporate environment. So yeah, it's an easy win to just chat what you know already about what you do and why you love it. I am completely averse to getting anyone on the phone. Everything I've ever done in terms of new business build has been on email. So we have just taken someone on who is just amazing on the phone. We listened to her very first conversation. We were like, oh, that's what we should be saying to people. She's just an absolute gem. But, you know, it doesn't matter if you don't want to jump on the phone or you don't want to go to those networking meetings. It can be email conversation, but make that email engaging and show your passion in those words.
And I think just to jump in, what made a difference for us is we produced our first social impact report earlier in the year. And I think having all that in one pack that we could then, we have it as a printed report, we have it as a flip book online. So every email we send out has the link to this social impact report. It just helps people understand what we do and how them by supporting us is supporting so many more people. And then we've got a lot of champions, to be fair, haven't we? People within the community who are always introducing us to people, you know, connecting us to people. I say those connections again, it just builds and it grows the more you do.
Yeah, we've incentivized our champions. So we still run a thing where if a subscriber gets a friend to subscribe, then they'll get entered into a prize draw, and we got a restaurant locally to give a little voucher. So that incentivizes your supporters and your champions. And we do that the same with businesses. If they recommend someone to advertise, they'll get a discount off their next advertising package. So it's generating business from your existing and getting those disciples to work for you. And then you're getting the new business connections with that kind of mate of a mate conversation. So it takes you out of the legwork. It's done for you in the background.
Nice virtuous circle.
Yeah, exactly. And then our pricing structure is very, very affordable for any length, kind of breadth of business size. We've got stuff that's, you know, £30 for somebody who just wants to come and advertise something once, all the way up to 900 quid for a full page for hopefully corporates and things that will come on board. But we've just made sure that we've covered everyone that we might be able to support and want to support us back.
That's a really important point around having things costed, so that you can generate new business. Because when somebody goes, oh, well, how much is this? Or what's your day rate? Or how do we do that? You're not going, or having to say, let me get back to you. You've got some options for a sliding scale or something to be able to sort of let people know whether you've done it before and that's what you're charging. Well, these people, you know, you've got people who've already paid and you say, well, this is the cost to do this. Or whether you've preempted stuff.
It also stops you getting a little bit woolly, especially if you've got like the social enterprise. We want to help people, and it's like, oh, that seems like a lot. I tell you, and before you know it, especially when you're quite new, you always feel a little bit awkward about charging people at all. And it's like, well, it should be, and you're literally in your own head, you're knocking money off and taking the notes off the end. Whereas once it said, actually, if you want to hire this room for half a day, it's £50. I've written it down. This is £50 for everyone. It's not. Well, because it's you. It's like, it's not because it's you. It's because I've got to pay the landlord and I've got to pay British Gas, who I've really I've fallen out with. But that whole idea, once you've decided,
I think there's
two flips of it. You know what you're doing.
There's two flip sides to that as well, because it is super exciting to be the owner of that conversation. You set the price. You know what you want to bring in, and if you want to do discount or do a multi-buy or something, that's on you. You don't need to ask anybody else. But the other side of it is that empowerment of saying, no, I've valued that at that value, and that's what I'm sticking to. And I've had someone ring up and go, oh yeah, you're a bit expensive, you're not like the MEN, are you? Can you ask the boss if you can do a discount? I'm like, I'm talking to the boss. That's what it is. If you don't want it, we're not going to work. So yeah, stand by your price when you fixed it. Don't be shy about talking about money.
And I think this comes back to what we're talking about, having a bit of oversight of your financial processes. Because if you've mapped out how much you actually need to bring in, then it's not a case of I'll do your favourites. It is costing you money if you don't charge it at the right rate.
And also the time as well, because the time and the money, they have to match each other, because you need a certain amount of time. There's only so many websites I can build at once. There's only so many people can be in this space, can be booking this room. Once you start working out, actually, this is how many websites, that type of website I can build. This is how many of those projects I can do. Everything goes in the same diary, and it doesn't matter whether it's to do with the charity that I run, if it's to do with the business, if one of my kids has got my youngest is big into going to the barbers at the moment. If she's going for a fresh trim and I've got a driver, it's all in the same diary, because there is only one Claire and it all has to balance out. So having your money and your time, having them work themselves out, because you've got to do enough work to bring in enough money to be able to carry on doing the things that you do. So
just thinking of something that we hadn't chipped in on here, which is a new business development tool, and I know Simone's done this, I've done this, Mike with us. Crowdfunding is a good new business development tool if you've got the patience and the energy. The energy.
It does.
Totally.
So you can just stick it up, and everyone who likes you will go on there and
that's not how it works at all. But in terms of generating new interest, testing your market, getting people to pitch into stuff that they otherwise wouldn't, we found that it's worked for us. Even if you test it out on a small amount of money, whether you're just going for 2,000 or 3,000 to see what happens, or whether you're going for 10 to 30 or more, which I know you do the sort of larger ones. It's a stressful thing to do, so it's not for the faint-hearted, but planned well and tested out over a 5 to 8 week period. And there's number that can help people do this. And there's match funding in Crowdfunder and some other sites that, for every pound they match it up to 10,000 or 20,000 or whatever. It can help you, gain new people. We certainly, and it helps you
force those people who say they're going to back you to actually have a bucket to back you with. So the first money we ever got out of the council and the universities and other places was through crowdfunding. And once they put money into the crowdfunding, they'd seen their money went further because of this and that, and then we'd delivered all of this great stuff. They were like, oh, right, well, that worked. And, you know, and crowdfunding is what helped us force public sector and some private businesses and individuals who came out of the woodwork and went, I've got this, you know.
What's brilliant, isn't it? Like what you were saying, Mel, it's like the community investing in you.
Yeah.
That community's invested in your idea and they're part of it now. So they want to make it work.
Yeah.
They want to see you succeed.
Yeah.
All them 20p's.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what like excites me about that kind of model, really.
Yeah. Not for the faint-hearted, not going to lightly, and me, Simone, and
we don't do a podcast today.
yeah, I've got a very good podcast. We've got training workshops and podcasts. There's plenty to to learn from, to not kind of go wrong, but there's some golden rules. But I wonder if it's worth opening out questions
to the floor. Yeah, absolutely. It'd be really interesting to hear everyone else's questions. So if you would rather not go on camera, just let me know now and I won't turn this computer. Is everyone okay to go on camera? Great. So do we have any questions from the floor for either
listening exercise at first, just digesting it, but are there questions that you wished you had answered or things come to mind that you want to share?
Well, they can be directed specifically to someone on the panel, or just an open question. It could be something, a problem that you're struggling with at the moment that you'd like some advice on. Oh, thanks, Simone.
That's not really for me. They're kind of from things that I hear.
So what I'd like to ask the panel is, there's quite a lot of people in this room and that I'm speaking to through Proper Good at the moment who are not sure about legal structure. Now, I think virtually everyone on the panel is a CIC, so that might challenge us. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, with your going for the community interest company CIC model, how that has impacted your income streams, if it has, what the pros and cons have been. Just interested to know, because it's a question I get asked quite a lot.
I think for me, it gave me options that I wouldn't have had. So originally, when I started building websites, I was a sole trader. And before I built websites, when I was selling as an independent children's clothes retailer, I was a sole trader. I was always just Claire Worthington trading as whatever I was doing that day.
Not just Claire Worthington.
Sorry, Claire Worthington trading as, yeah. But because I wanted to be, I knew when I decided I wanted to incorporate, so things like the Kickstart scheme, I couldn't apply for that unless I was incorporated. So, and I knew I wanted to incorporate anyway. So then it was like, well, what should I incorporate as? So usually if I was just...
We had long chats about that, didn't we?
Yeah. So to be a digital agency, I could just be limited and that'd be fine. You can happily build websites. But because I already knew that I wanted to be able to do the digital inclusion work, and it means if, for example, if I was limited, then things like being able to apply for the National Lottery, well, I haven't done it yet, but if I was limited, I wouldn't even be able to. So it gave me the different options, because it's still commercial. The idea is still, you do work, you charge for it, you get paid. It's just that there are extra, it's what you're expected to do with the profits that you make. So if I suddenly make a vast amount of money by building all of these websites, running all of these programs, it's not like new Porsches for all. Yeah, fine, you can buy yourself a Porsche if you want, but actually there should still be obvious that these are my two goals as a CIC. So to fight digital exclusion, increase diversity in tech. So I need to be able to show that actually the work I've done has done that. I've not just made a load of money, not supported anyone with digital inclusion, not done anything about diversity, but look at my new Porsche. As a limited, I could do that if I wanted to. So for me, the CIC meant it gave me extra options that I wouldn't have had if I'd picked any of the other models.
And that's often the case, isn't it? I might quickly jump in, and I run a couple of things. So my sole trader consultancy business, I'm obviously director of Flourish Together, and then Pop-Up Spa Retreat is a constituted group on an unincorporated association. And it's like, we do run sessions on legal structure. We find it's such a one-to-one conversation with people. We've held off for a little while, but we can run a legal structure session happily in like January or something, and we can talk about it along the way like we are. So we at Flourish were a constituted group for about 3 years, I never rush people into setting up a company, kick or otherwise, because it's a headache, it's a faff. You've got to report to these people, you've got to find 2 other people that you trust to run this thing with. Yeah, you've got to pay £750 a year for your accounts. If you're not making any money, how are you paying your accountant? So I never saddle. Do you not? Company accounts. Well, I'm happy with the service I'm getting, but company accounts. I've done 3 different accountants in the last 5 years, and the company accounts have always been around 700 quid, including that. And so, yeah, tell me who you know. But yeah, they're sole trader accounts are more like, you know, 150 to 250 quid, but as company it'll cost you double what it's costing you.
Fair as a sole trader, I've always just done my own. I'm pretty sure I'm ripping myself off, like the year where I didn't declare any of my mileage because I hadn't written it all down, that kind of thing. But
and I you know, it's just an aside that, you know, there were certain things that within setting up that incorporated model that cost more from the off. So looking at a constitution with 3 non-related people, 2 signatories in a bank account, usually community and societies account, you can then, you know, to not have to pay business fees. I mean, we have a business account, we've not paid business fees, you know, in the 5 years that we've been running. So shopping around for stuff and working stuff through helps you save those costs. But ultimately, governance models, using the unincorporated association work for flexibility, options freedom, not staying under the radar, but not having all this additional reporting, and that worked just fine. But there's risks, and you don't have the limited liability. So when you set up a company, community interest company, for example, you know, directors are technically liable to pay £1 if the thing wraps up. That's not strictly true, because if you've not run the business well and mismanaged stuff, you can still be, you know, taken to court and everything else. But having appropriate insurance in place, whether you're an unincorporated association or any form of company, you know, helps mitigate on any kind of risk on those sorts of fronts. So in terms of how has it helped us, I think we're the same as Claire. We can trade, and we can there's nothing stopping us from doing anything we want to do to the level that we want to do it. I know people who've converted from a kick into a charity because actually it was, you know, if you're a charity, then you've got more funding and grant funding options. We never wanted to be grant funding reliant anyway. We never really have been. But if your market push, if your community is never going to be able to pay for what you're doing, and everything that you do is so highly charitable, you know, then setting up a kick's not going to help you. If you definitely want to pay your directors, setting up a charity is not going to help you. So there's just pros and cons to the different models depending on where people are at, and I don't know if I've helped there at all, but certainly if you're going to be grant funding independent, you've got highly charitable aims and you need to be a charity, be a charity. If you're a bit more hybrid than that and you want to be able to trade and you want to be able to have more options, and then, you know, then be a kick. And if you're not sure what you want to be yet, don't jump into something, and just test things out, be a constituted group, or talk to people that have been there and done it from the different angles. And we've got podcasts on that from all different factions to be able to give you a sense of, do I want to be a co-op, do I want to be a, you know, stay as I am. So that's what we will often say. But it'd be interesting to hear what Oonagh and the guys at Heatons, the papers will say. Any thoughts on why you chose?
I was really lucky at the time that I was considering, I was already a director on a film company, and I was looking at different options, and I was working on participating on a women in business group. It's one that was run by Jenny Matthews, and it was during that process, again, you know, using the connections and the information that was there, I connected with the business advisor, and we went through the pros and cons, and it was really clear to me that a CIC was the best option.
And do all business advisors have knowledge of CICs?
Well, because it was a women in business, this particular women in business one, she really did. And she was amazing. Bridget Doyle, do you know?
Yeah,
Bridget.
But that's not the norm, I would just say.
It's not but Bridget, fantastic. And she spent a lot of time going through everything. And as far as I could see, it was win-win for me. I knew that I was going to be in an area that wasn't going to, you know, sort of produce huge profits, and when we were going to get profitable, it was only going to be after a period of time. So, and I was more than happy to make sure that this company that I was building was going to have longevity long after I'm part of the organization. So that's the intention. So that was the reason I did it for me.
Any thoughts from your side? Because there's quite commercial aspects, I guess, in your business.
Yeah.
I guess you might be structured in a number of bits as well.
Yeah, so we have the umbrella company, Drawing Board Productions, which holds everything. So anything we do comes under that. And we basically didn't want to go as a limited company because we needed access to those funding pots. But we made the simple decision of, well, it's me and Amanda and a third person, Suze, who left the area. We don't want a steering committee. We don't want a board of people putting in their own agendas. We know what we want to deliver here, and we have you know, a wonderful vision of how this might grow. And actually we're going to be just, you know, just do this, what the three of us want, and now what the two of us want, which is completely aligned. Making quick decisions, yeah, absolutely. You know, we sit together in one room and go, I like the idea of that project. How do you think we can make it work? We can. Brilliant. Let's do it.
Is it Drawing Board Productions CIC?
It is, yeah. So so that was the question between charity versus CIC, because we were the charity. It was loads more paperwork, which we didn't want to do, and then having to have that kind of accountability model, like accountability.
You can
to
create
ourselves.
that accountability model,
Absolutely,
but you don't have to. Which is
it doesn't have to be official.
Or you don't have to do it the first 2 or 3 years or 5 years. It might evolved that you want to have.
Yeah. So in terms of the timeline for us, so we started the conversations in November 19, kick-started the crowdfunder in December 19, and then published the first paper in February 2020. We didn't actually register the company until May 2020 because we were busy and we didn't get time to do the paperwork. We were still billing people and we still had all of our processes in place in terms of insurance for delivering the newspaper and bank account and everything there to just go, right, okay, it's worked for the last few months.
So
let's go.
You were a constituted group.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah, absolutely.
Legally speaking, you know, that's.
And we recognised that, you know, when we were looking at fundings, you had to be a CIC, or certain things they support kind of constituted groups, but not CICs, or vice versa. But the bigger ones, kind of like if you were, you had to be a CIC. So it's like it made sense for us, isn't it, with what we were trying to access.
And it was really interesting actually, because obviously there is some pots of funding that you cannot access unless you're a charity. And I actually called them on it for one particular one. It was a trust fund. And I rang them and I said, why is that? And it's a legacy thing. We're looking at changing the policy. So I don't think that it's as narrow as it used to be.
Finally, years ago, started funding kits.
That's it.
Postcode lottery
changing.
had a thing where they would only fund charities 25 grand and kicks could only apply for 2, and that's just changed in the last year.
And I think the one thing I would say is even if we don't set up anything official, just put the processes in place and
your insurance.
I now, looking back, think would have paid for an accountant before paying for ourselves, because that minefield I've just had to unpick of accountant we've had for a long time, bookkeeper. The minefield I've just had to unpick of handing over so that she can do invoicing and things. I would have got a bookkeeper probably before we'd open the first kind of email.
And I personally think it helps with transparency somewhat as well. So when I've got a sole trader business here, constituted group then is kick here, if anybody starts talking again, you know, what's she squirreling away, or what's this stuff, that, the other, it's not just me that's done this stuff. I've got an accountant who's done all of my books to say squeaky clean. Off you go.
And in terms of bank
Louise
accounts,
nudging me. My bookkeeper's called Louise, and she'll send me a long spreadsheet of where, right, Claire, here's a list of things that I don't have a receipt for. Here's things that you've paid for, where it says Village Web Company, but it doesn't say Village Web Company CIC. Is that you as a CIC? Is that you as a that? Because essentially the people at HMRC don't care. They're not interested. Either they think I'm up to no good or they're not. And having Louise send me this big long spreadsheet that took me forever to go through.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of me where it's like, I'm not sure I can afford it, but it's like, if I haven't got time now to go through a list of the anomalies, I definitely didn't have time to go through all of the other stuff that went through smoothly. So it feels like a lot, but it's probably worth it.
And I think this is the bit, isn't it, that can put people off, because it does sound like, oh God.
If you're not making loads of money, you've not got loads of customers, you've not got some retail business that's got loads of income and expenditure on a daily basis, it's quite straightforward. Really.
If you can get your processes, it's getting yourself into good habits.
I
naturally veer to bad habits. It took me a while to stop doing stuff that I've been able to get away with as a sole trader, because there's only ever been me. I've never had to employ anybody. I've never really taken that much income out of the business. So as long as you're not up to no good, as a sole trader, HMRC don't really care. They just want to know what came in, what went out. Now that I'm an incorporated business, it's like, okay, this is what went out. Where did it go out to? And they're much more likely to want to see the receipts. I mean, I've literally got all the receipts, but it might take me a while to sort of turn my house upside down and find them all.
Also really important on what Oonagh was saying at the beginning, if you want social investment, you've got to have your house in order. So even thinking about going along that route, you've got to know where your money's coming and going to.
And your bank account, it took me, I'll let you into a little secret. I mean, I'm really good at telling people, set up a separate account, don't muddle things up in your personal account, because you're using all the savings account, set up a new account. And then I have a separate tax account, so I'm never frightened that that tax money is not going to be paid. So whenever an invoice comes in, wherever it's going to Flourish, I'll invoice to my personal, my sole trader account. There's some bunny hopping around as to how things get paid, but the tax comes out and it's sitting in the tax account. So we can talk to people again about things like that, how you do it and how to govern things. But the point I'm trying to make is the bank statement for your business, what otherwise sole trader is your storyteller. And so even if you can't find your receipt, or even if you're quite sure, if you've used the right card or the right account to pay for stuff, it's taken care of itself. And the accountant will love you for that, because there's nothing much to do other than to just go down all of this stuff. As long as you've got your invoices, we're very invoice heavy when you're a service-based business. Your invoices are going to marry up, so there's not much to find, or you can find them, or you can re-ask for them. And your receipts, you do really need to keep in files, or photograph them on these apps, or however you wish.
HubDoc's really good for that. You literally, it's like, I went and got some extra bottled water, sat in the car, took a picture of the receipt. It's gone. Louisa's got a copy of it whenever she needs it. It's already there.
So in terms of the bank account as well, I hadn't even factored this. If you are operating through your personal bank account, then if you get audited, all of that is visible to HMRC. Everything, all of your Tesco shop or whatever you bought for yourself, everything goes to them. So just to keep that separate for your own kind of privacy.
Like I think you kind of alluded to that. If you're starting up and you've not decided on a structure, I probably recommend this to a couple of you in the room. Just a separate,
using all savings,
just a separate personal normal account.
And also because you don't get charged for personal banking. So although the banks will say, oh yeah, have a business account and you'll get 18 months of this, that and the other. Well, you sort of started that clock running down from day one, and you might not have needed that, especially if you're brand new. You might not be doing that much, but every time you pay anything in, every time you pay anything out, if they say, oh, you get hundreds of transactions, literally, if you transfer money from one account to another, there's a transaction. If you actually go to the bank account and take that money out, there's another transaction. So if you don't need to be paying any of the high street banks for business banking, well, don't. But once you're incorporated, it's like you have to, me and my business are now two separate people legally. So if I want to, Village Web Company CIC has its own bank account. It's not open to discussion anymore, but until you've reached that, you don't have to.
And making sure you pick the right card out of your that was my problem years ago.
Having 6 on your phone for Apple Pay, don't do that.
And then you start transferring things back to yourself, and you never do, and it's like, oh, so I'm a lot better.
So in terms of bank, we have NatWest and Metal, and neither charge us.
Exactly.
And we have a phenomenal amount of transactions going in and out now. So neither charge us. So you don't have to even worry when you're ready for the business account.
I'm with Starling, and Starling doesn't cost me anything.
There's a lot of options.
Accounts as well. Lottery won't pay into Starling.
Really?
I just had to do dormant accounts because I set up my business at 2020. It started. and I didn't know what to do, and that sort of thing panicked me. And obviously I didn't need an accountant because I'd not been coming in or going out, but I still had to prepare it at the company's house. And I'm writing, and they were really helpful, and they found somebody else's version that somebody else had submitted that had been accepted, so they knew it would be okay. They just sent it to me and said, copy it, put your own stuff in, and then we'll upload it for you.
That's good.
I think this is a really good point there to Michaela's point about not setting up as a CIC or incorporating whatever form until money is coming in and going out. Like
some people feel they've got to protect the name or protect this, and there's an element of that in there.
And it still costs a little bit of money, and it's just a process that you might not have to do just yet. So.
And I think your point about really reiterating, because when it's, I was setting up, they spent quite a bit of time with me explaining, if you set up this, you can't reverse to that, or if you go for this option, you could. And it's understanding all of that. That's great. And a lot of people wouldn't think, because it's a government, sort of office. You think about tax
and they're not a big team, actually.
And they're great. They really are. They're really nice people.
Yeah, I wish someone had had a chat with us about our year-end dates, because we did it from the May, because that was when we did the paperwork, and then I went, oh, actually I quite like it to be calendar year, don't know why, but it doesn't really matter. But then, so we've changed it 3 times, and that's the limit. So now we've got, like, our first year is May to February, our second year is February to December, but not quite, because on the accounts it's January to December, and our third year, finally this year, it'll be normal. But nobody tells you this stuff at the beginning. Who knows what the year-end point is? Like, does it matter? Does it not?
Sometimes it might suit you to have it at different times.
Yeah.
And it's staggering what you're doing.
Yeah.
So who knew there was so much enthusiasm talking about accounts?
Yeah. Louise will be so proud.
We've probably got time for one question, if there is a burning question from anyone in the audience.
Yeah. So, well, before I ask it, I want to say I'm so grateful that each of you so generous in sharing your time and experience, because to get to the point that we're probably at now, in probably slightly different stages, but certainly in my case, to get to the point of where I'm at now, I've been in a lot of rooms where I was told I was an anomaly, I was a troublemaker, thinking differently, or trying to make a change, or trying to make it have an impact, and it takes a lot out of you. So it's so refreshing and inspiring, actually, to hear that each of you have gone ahead and done that anyway. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
What's the organisation?
So I am trying to redefine what an English teacher does and how they work. And I tried to do it within the education system, and that didn't go so well. So I'm trying to do it outside and establish a writing coach business, which I've been a sole trader for a year, and I'm now poised to make a decision about what form that takes, to do it on a larger scale and to be sustainable. So Beth, does she do the groups, the holiday club group? Yes, she's on my list. She's on my list.
That's lovely. You'll like her.
Yeah.
She's an ex-English teacher.
Right. But I came from overseas work, where I was a TV producer writing scripts for many years, and came back, and it's not easy to find a place. Yeah. So a lot of what each of you have said resonates. But my question is, if you think back to the point where so you might have trialed what you want to do and decided what your goal and purpose is, and you're poised to make that decision about what form it takes. So you've thought about it in terms of a physical space. You might have started this kind of more of a women's network type, so and for yourselves, like a physical publication to develop people in the way that you wanted. How did you make that decision, and were you looking at various options of how you'd kind of make that impact, or did you just go instinctively on what felt right for you at the time?
I think for me, I'd done bits of it before. So with the digital skills stuff, I did operate as a pop-up. So in between ranting on Twitter about the council's website and forcing people to do stuff online, I discovered the Online Centres Network, which is run by the Good Things Foundation. So I found that as well as ranting, I could join this network that gave free digital skills training. So when I started delivering that, I was doing it as a pop-up. So I'd be at like Bredbury Library for like 6 weeks on a Tuesday between this time and that time. And it worked, but it only worked for really small numbers of people who happened to be there, who knew I was there, who came at the right time. And then it'd be, oh, I didn't know you were there. I would have come if you'd known. So for me, I knew that being a pop-up, it didn't really work for it. And also things like being able to offer work experience placements. So like this year, I had 2 lads from Marple Hall School who came and physically worked in the shop. I mean, the first one was only here for a day because he wasn't well, but the other one was here for like the full 4 days. And having Declan on his apprenticeship, there's an actual building, an actual workspace. So I knew that I wanted a physical space, but based on me and Declan couldn't have hung out in my spare bedroom because it's weird and it's not big enough. But also things like the work experience stuff, I couldn't offer those placements to anyone else. But because I've got my own space, I can do so much more with it.
The pros and cons process that you've gone through to choose your point. Quickly on ours, I had no clue how we were going to make a business out of what we did. I've piloted all sorts for years prior to what we did, and I think doing it on your own is tricky. And I've done loads of stuff on my own. I do stuff on my own all the time, but somehow having a co-founder was what spurred me on and helped with things. And then we grew our board from there. And there are people who are in that position. It's not required, it's not necessary particularly to get going, but I find that does help. So thinking who's a backup or a support or a sounding board, or who might come in and do a bit, or so having those other aligned people around you helps you have a sounding board to make decisions with. And then we started up doing monthly peer learning events. So we did free. So I just, me and Joe, sort of partly kicked off my move, decided we've got. I'm happy to give a day a month of my time to see if we can make this work or to test what we want to do. So if I knew I'd got a day a week or a couple of days a month, and I'll focus on this. So I worked out what I was prepared to give financially in kind to see if this worked for 6 to 12 months. And I was prepared to see, right, well, how do you build? So it's the community that decides. I think when I was listening to you, working out what you can do that's feasible, safe, and that you're practically able to sort out financially and physically and otherwise. And then the community can only guide you, or the market, can only guide what's going to work. And so that's why you have to test what you're doing quickly to see what will work. And so we had free space, like I said years ago, free space in universities, in cafes and other spaces, where we ran monthly peer learning on, and it was like a themed bit like this, very much like this. We're still doing what we first did, but they were free. They'd be Eventbrited, people would come along, and it built and built and built. And what if you look at the first year of peer learning sessions that we ran, it basically looks like what our Time to Grow programs looks like now. But we wanted to offer free stuff to the public, which we gifted and did. We had a little bit of funding to cover odds, sods and bits and bobs. We got some money to research what we've done. Getting paid to do research that tells you and somebody else what's going on is a helpful steer as well, and will help you build more contacts and build credibility for what you're doing. And then over time we started to look at, well, how is this going to get paid? And it took another year of probably some grants to test a bit more for the council and a couple of other spaces to say, we'll buy this now, or for people to start buying in our business development support. And then off over time with that, we were able to spot that things like the WEA learning funds, so education and skills grants to help you do adult education, which loads of social enterprises are really good at, we're just waiting to see what happens with that organisation now the ESF money's gone. But building up to a point where we could go for that level of work was kind of where we got. So there's been that, the community have led us all the way, and they still lead us now. And every programme we do and everything we do, it's constantly listening. Everything that's on our timetable for this is like, what have people told us we want? That's the way we shape it. And then you're not going, oh, what should I do? Because you've got 10 or 15 or 100 people telling you what you should be doing. But not like you should do this, like a thing that
we'd really like it if somebody else would do this thing.
I think that was the thing for us, wasn't it? Is that yes, we decided against a steering committee and a death by kind of conference of making decisions, but every single decision we've made has been driven by what community feedback's come back from. And
and that's how we started with it as well. The reason we started the paper was because, you know, you hear people say, well, constantly we're being asked, why are you doing a physical paper? Everything's online. And then people say, oh, you know, print's dead. It's really not. And the reason the reason we started the paper, or had the idea for it really, was because we had connections with community groups, and they were all saying to us how difficult communication was. Everyone's relying on social media, on email databases. Your email just sits there, it doesn't get opened all the time. And if you do it on like one of these platforms where you can send out bulk emails, you can see how many people actually open it. The percentage is tiny. Yeah.
Well, not with this, but just even getting through junk mail.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that, you know,
there's more connection as well.
Yeah.
It's something like tangible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And imagine like during the lockdowns as well, so people out delivering on their daily walk, and there's that connection.
Absolutely.
Meeting.
Checking on neighbours, and so that's kind of how, you know, we formed the newspaper idea. And from the very beginning, as I said, we're not experts, we don't have a background in newspapers, but we were very open and said, this is the community's newspaper. You tell us what you want it to be. If you want to write a column on well-being, great. If you want to write a column on food, whatever, you know, we wanted that input from the community. It wasn't us saying, like, this is the paper, this is what it's always going to be. And we've constantly evolved and changed as people have come to us and said, oh, before, you know, do you want to do this? Can I do this? Yeah, great.
Yeah, and I think
I'm just going to how you capture that, or how initially in the early days before you started the paper, how you would capture, what format did you capture that
conversations with people that we knew that would be helpful, and not have their own agenda in the background, and then just a simple Google form and just firing it out to community groups, to fire to their network, putting it on social media, just that almost that kind of questionnaire at a supermarket door version of you know, electronic version.
We're very big on post-its, and they give you a post-it task, or rather Simone around marketing. And your presence and purpose kind of stuff that we often do that, but there's loads of creative ways to bring your teaching skills into it. And how would you ask the kids, you know, what they want to do for this school trip, or you know, what they want to do, or what they want to read, or you know, you've got the skills in there. It's just kind of time.
And I think the challenge is everyone think, well, I'm a perfectionist, and I'm getting less so, because I just realised if you want to get anything done, just do it and just learn along the way. It doesn't have to be perfect at the start, because that whole journey of making it into what you want, you'll find, like, you know, we knew we wanted a paper and a paper's print, and we knew the look and feel, but the content now, if I look at number 1 versus issue 32 that we're designing now, it's vastly different, and the branding's still the same and the look and feel, but the content has just changed so much because of the different people that have come forward.
And the range of organisations, you know, we have, you know, like Stockport wide, Greater Manchester wide organisations that are trying to reach communities. They're coming to us. So it's not just, you know, your immediately local organisations that want to reach our community. It's the ones from outside that want to reach those communities as well, let them know what services they offer.
It's just constantly evolving and being open to that evolution of the product. So you've got an idea and you love what you're doing, and as long as you keep that passion throughout, then just let it grow and see what happens.
Don't be scared to
I think one of the things that struck me about you saying in the meeting that you had with them, people found it really difficult to put you in a particular pigeonhole. Well, that's astonishing in a way when you think about how technology has impacted, you know, the creation of companies. If you think about everybody that's here, majority of us, the core concept of our business had not been invented 10 years ago. You know, about we brought technology, we brought, you know, innovation to what we do, and that's exactly the same. You might come up with a job title in a way that hasn't been used so far, and why not? I think that's a great thing.
Well, I have been doing it for a year, so there are clearly clients, but it's scaling it, isn't it, and making it sustainable and paying the bills and all of those.
And I think sometimes it's about putting yourself in a room full of people who are your people and do get
And if you're here all day, you'll get plenty of time to chat this afternoon.
Don't anyone leave the room.
On that note, I'm really conscious of time. Thank you. And I'd like to, in just a moment, before anyone has to shoot off, I think we just take the opportunity to introduce all of us to each other so everyone knows what we're doing. Absolutely, and then you can chat over. So, yeah, so I'm just going to close. Oh. I'm just going to stop recording, Simone, and then I'll move on. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to all our brilliant panelists. That was really, really interesting. Thank you, Oonagh, Nickala, Claire, Amanda, and Mel. That was brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much.